There's serotonin receptors in the bone. And in fact, our gut produces 90 or 95% of the serotonin. It's not actually produced in our brain, but there are receptors in our bone, on the bone cells for serotonin. And what it does is it disrupts the natural balance of the bone building cells, the osteoblasts, and the cells that break down old, worn out bone and recycle it, called osteoclasts. So what it does, it allows osteoclasts to be more active. And so you're breaking down more bone and you're not building up new bone as fast.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn Trepic, your host and health coach, here with you every week. And believe it or not, in the 4 years of this show, we have never focused an episode on bone health, which is sort of wild, and that changes today. So let me introduce you to our featured guest. He's a naturopathic doctor, the founder and president of Nutritional Biochemistry, Inc. He earned his naturopathic medical degree from Bastyr University, where he was awarded the Founders Award for Academic and Clinical Excellence. In his career, he's published more than 100 medical articles, written 4 health and wellness books, and is now a #1 Amazon best-selling author in the field of osteoporosis with his most recent book, Fracture Proof Your Bones, a comprehensive guide to osteoporosis. In case that isn't enough, he's also an editor of the textbook Laboratory Evaluations for Integrative and Functional Medicine, which was used across the United States to train and educate physicians on using functional medicine with their patients. A sought-after speaker and educator, he's now joining the Salad with a Side of Fries esteemed community of guests. So please help me welcome Dr. John Neustadt.
What a wonderful introduction. That was great. I'm fired up for this now.
Awesome. I love it. I feel like I got to get sound effects, right? Like, what's that horn? Like the,
Right.
Well, welcome. I want to start with your story of finding naturopathic medicine and then the specialty of bone health. And then we'll dive deeper from there. But first, we have to tell our members what they're getting. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So members, it's still November, so I'm on the healthiest holidays kick with your recipes. So today's is great really for any night of the week this time of year, not just when you have company. So it's for herb roasted acorn squash with Parmesan. It's so good, surprisingly easy. You probably don't even need a grocery run if you have the acorn squash. And then from Dr. John Neustadt, today's guest, our members are getting, check this out, you're getting not only a free PDF copy of his book, Fracture Proof Your Bones, but also 10% off his NBI products. Amazing. Dr. John, give us a little, why does everybody want this book? Although we're going to talk about it a lot in this episode, but a one-liner of why people want the PDF download.
Well, truly, it can save your life or somebody you love because this disease is so common. I'll go over the statistics and why it's getting even more common during the show. But the book walks you through step by step what questions to ask your doctor, what to look for, what you can do to create your own holistic bone health plan that isn't only great for your bones, but also can reduce cardiovascular disease risk, diabetes risk, cancer risk, on, because what we know is when you use this holistic approach that I've applied here based on the research and the data into osteoporosis to bone health, it also helps nourish and enhance and improve the health of all aspects and all areas of our life. And truly, as you'll hear today, taking care of your bones, making sure you're focusing on that is something that can save your life and at the very least, improve your quality of life and your enjoyment.
Absolutely. I love it. So friends, if you want this recipe, the free copy of Fracture Proof Your Bones, or 10% off the NBI products from Dr. John Neustadt, be sure you're a member. You're going to go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you're getting weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners like today, plus quarterly live Q&A sessions. It is a total deal. Dare I say it every time, it's a steal because when you take advantage of the full offerings, you're going to save far more than that $10 cost. So a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, your membership supports this podcast and this community so that we can continue to bring you new episodes and experts every week. So remember, all you have to do is go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes because that's even easier. Once you're there, you're going to click support now. Enter your email and payment info, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the herb roasted acorn squash with Parmesan, the free copy of Fracture Proof Your Bones, and 10% off NBI products from Dr. John. Okay, over to you. Tell us your story because you were a project manager for like high-tech companies, right? And then you became a naturopathic doctor. So how did this come to be?
Yes, this is not my first career. I was working in high tech in the Seattle area and frankly, miserable. The old saying, a square peg in a round hole, whatever that is. Well, that was me. And I was focused on a career and advancing a career that was not in line with my true calling and what I was really passionate about. I started to get sick and I went to my medical doctor. I can't even say my medical doctor because I hadn't been sick before. I was in my 20s and or early 30s, actually. So I just looked at who my insurance company would pay for. It was a name on a list, and I went and met with this person, this physician, and he walked into the treatment room with his prescription pad already out in his hand. And he, as I was asking him questions, because I was wanting to understand what was happening with me, what could I do? He seemed to grow more and more impatient. And it was quite clear that he just wanted to get on to the next patient. And the only thing he offered me, the only thing he said was, well, there's nothing we can do. I can write you a prescription. That was it. Medicine is a service industry. And like any service industry, I'm of the mindset that if I don't like what I hear or the service I'm getting, I'm going to go look for somewhere else. I had heard of this naturopathic medical school, Bastyr University in Seattle, and I knew a couple people who were naturopathic medical students there, and I was impressed. They were smart people. They really were passionate about this medicine they were learning about and how they talked about the body to me and what I learned from them. It made sense. So I decided, let me check out these people down the road here and see what they have to say. I made an appointment with the teaching clinic, and I had 2 student clinicians, and the supervisor was the chief medical officer. The appointment was 45 minutes long. They asked wonderful questions. None of my questions were greeted with hesitancy or resistance, or they didn't look down on me. All of my questions were answered and teaching me what I could do and what was going on with my body, which I loved. And at the very end of that appointment, the supervising doctor had gotten to know me so well with the questions he was asking me that he looked at me and he said, you need to quit your job. He realized in that short time that we were together that the underlying cause of what was going on with me was stress, and that I was doing something with my life that really I didn't want to be doing, and that was creating this unending high level of stress that was causing my physical symptoms and my problems that I was starting to develop. And had I stayed in that career, I'm convinced it would have just continued to get worse and worse. And like so many Americans, I'd be on multiple medications, just suppressing or masking symptoms so I could keep going, like putting Band-Aids over something that never really heals. And I took that to heart, what he said. And I think at that point in my life, I was just looking for validation for what I already knew inside that I needed a change. I was already thinking about going back to medical school. I was looking at integrated medical programs, like a DO program, but hadn't really found anything that clicked. But what I heard from him made sense. And so the next week I quit my job, left the high-tech world. I'd already done a lot of my pre-med stuff because I'd studied botany in undergrad and started enrolling in the process of enrolling and changing my career.
Good for you. I mean, it's interesting because I am hearing it more and more these days that people's providers and clinicians are recommending changing career or figuring that out. But I also think there's a certain kind of person who hears that and runs the other direction or, puts the earmuffs on. And then there's you who really ran with it. But do you think it's because you were already thinking about it?
I was ready to hear the information. So anyone who has children, I have two teenagers now, I'm sure has had the same experiences that I've had, meaning I can give them advice, give them my perspective, give them my recommendations until I'm blue in the face, which I've done over and over, and they get rejected. But somebody else says it, or maybe I say it in a moment where they're ready to hear it. And that's when it clicks. I think it's the same with adults. When somebody's ready to hear the information and ready and able to take it in, they will. And until that time, the best we can do with love and compassion is provide some information, provide some knowledge, provide some feedback. And if they're ready to take it and ready to run with it, they will.
Absolutely. And that's why we do what we do. These podcasts, right? They sit there, they listen, and they're always here for people. So then so you went back to school for naturopathic medicine, and then how did you land into this specialty of bone health?
I never saw myself specializing in this. But what happened was I started getting patients with osteoporosis. And one of my mentors and the founders of my university, Dr. Bill Mitchell, said to us in one of our advanced classes in our last year, he said, your patients will tell you what they need. And if you listen well enough, you'll hear it. And I started getting the message loud and clear as I'm getting patients coming in more and more with osteoporosis. And I think I'm doing a great job. I'm doing what I was taught at the time and what I learned, even working with an integrative approach and tracking their bone density. And their bone density was going up, so they were happy. But my mother-in-law has osteoporosis, and she was on Fosamax. She was seeing her medical doctor. I was working with her a little bit with nutritionally, but her bone density was going up. And so she was happy. Her physician was happy. I was happy. And then she tripped on a throw rug in her house and broke her hip. And I thought to myself, something is not right with this picture. She was doing the standard of care. She was taking the medication. Her physician told her she's doing great. She's protected. She thought she was doing great. I did based on what I knew at the time. So I started to dive into the research to really try and understand this condition that frankly, most doctors don't understand how to treat properly. And what I discovered shocked me. And so I kept going down this, I call it down this rabbit hole. I love looking at research where I'll read a study and I'll look at the citations and then I'll go pull up those studies until I get down to a fundamental level of understanding where I then am able to communicate that clearly to people. So even before, when I was in the high tech world, I was working as a technical writer. And even before that, I was a journalist. So this isn't even my second, career. This is my third. And I love the process of communicating and writing. And it's when I can communicate something clearly and succinctly for a non-technical audience, that's when I know I really understand it myself. So I kept going and going until I reached that point. And so many people were reaching out to me over the years. I put it all finally into a book.
Yeah. So we're going to dig into, what you were doing with your patients, why these diagnostic tools are insufficient. But let's pause for a second to discuss why, like using your mother-in-law's story, like why is breaking a hip not even really like breaking other bones, right? Like why is this worth prioritizing prevention, right? Because I know there's dramatic mortality rates, right?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, if I can put it in context in terms of osteoporosis, the most dangerous thing about the condition is breaking a bone. So the number on a test is only as helpful as it can predict a fracture. But the real thing we're trying to work with and prevent are fractures because they're so deadly. Every 30 seconds somewhere in the world, somebody with osteoporosis is breaking a bone. And in fact, globally, osteoporosis is second only to cardiovascular disease as a health concern. And it accounts for more days spent in a hospital than other diseases like heart attacks, diabetes, and breast cancer. And if you're a woman 45 years or older, your risk for an osteoporosis fracture is equal to your combined risk of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer. So first of all, I want to put it in that context.
I almost want to pause for a second and have you say that again, because that is not small.
No, it's a huge problem. And most people don't understand it. There is an osteoporosis awareness month, but there's nobody walking around, pink ribbons and huge, fundraising campaigns and media campaigns around it. It's a silent disease that is deadly that most people don't even know they have because it's not symptomatic unless and until somebody breaks a bone. The first symptom oftentimes is somebody fracturing a bone. And as you mentioned with a hip fracture, they're dangerous and deadly. If you have osteoporosis and fracture a hip, there's up to a 36% chance that you're going to be dead within a year. And your risk for dying is elevated for up to 10 years after that. And even those who survive the first year, 50% of them never regain their pre-fracture level of pain-free mobility and ability to enjoy the lifestyle that they had before without pain. And in fact, 20% need additional assistance ongoing for the pain and the reduced ability, the ability or the reduction in their ability to do just basic tasks like dress themselves.
So I want to connect the dots for everybody because I can picture somebody listening and going, seriously, like what does the hip fracture have to do with overall mortality? So is it a function of that consequential, like I know it's such a challenging recovery and isolating. So is it that community piece? Is it that there's this mental health component that dramatically shifts what their life is like? Like, how do we draw the line between the event and then that increased mortality?
So the answers to your question are yes and yes. It's community, it's isolation, but it's more than that. It's what happens physiologically and emotionally is it's sort of this web of interactions. And it's oftentimes the last straw that breaks that, proverbial, camel's back. I've fallen and I can't get up. There's this downward spiral of events that begin to happen. So you break a bone and it's painful and there's inflammation and you're sedentary. And so there's an increased risk for blood clots that can cause pulmonary embolism or strokes, oftentimes with inflammation. People's appetite goes down, so they're not eating enough to heal efficiently and quickly. When they're depressed, also, appetite goes down. Then they have muscle wasting, so they're weaker, so they're less steady on their feet when they get up, and they're more isolated. And it's just this downward spiral effect and increasing that risk for mortality then, or if people have other diseases. So if they have cardiovascular disease or diabetes and then they break a hip, their risk for mortality is on that higher end. So it's this web of interactions that conspire against people healing and recovering.
Got it. Okay. So going back to then your mother-in-law and in your clinic, right? You're seeing that increased bone density in the scans, but then there are still these fractures. So what are the issues or problems, so to speak, with the diagnostic tools that we're currently using, which from what I know is always like bone density scans is really the only one, but I'm sure there are more.
There are more, but the gold standard is the bone density test. And that's the standard against which all other diagnostic tools and tests are measured. So let me go back historically a little bit, because I think it'll shed a bit of light onto the situation that we're in now. This was first identified in the 1940s by an MD in Massachusetts who noticed that pigeons, or that women, when they went through menopause, would start to lose bone, start to get weaker bones. And so he took pigeons and he removed the ovaries. Ovaries produce estrogen. And when women go through menopause, they lose estrogen. So he took the ovaries out of pigeons and noticed with this technology that existed at the time, these X-rays, that there was less bone in the pigeon. And so he called it less bone in bone. And that criteria then for osteoporosis continued and was codified by the World Health Organization in the 1990s, that a bone density test then detecting a decrease in bone mass is going to be the diagnosis for this disease we call osteoporosis. And really, the porosis comes from porous, porous bones. Where on a bone density test, you can see holes within the bone matrix. But that's just the mineral component of the bone. Bone is a tissue. All tissues are made up of different things. The minerals are just one part of bone. Another major part of bone is the connective tissue, or the collagen in bone, which is collagen is a protein. In fact, there are about 180 to 200 different proteins in bone alone. It's a very complex organ. And when you're just measuring the mineral component of bone, you're not really capturing the strength. You're not quantifying the strength of the bone. You're quantifying the amount of minerals that are in the bone, which only have a limited connection to overall strength. So that's why, and we've known this since the 1990s, that a bone density test predicts less than half of people who will fracture. And then in 2008, study came out that quantified that even further. And now we know that women with osteoporosis, a bone density test only predicts 44% of them who will break a bone, and only 21% of men. So it is quite limited in its ability to predict fractures, but it is the diagnostic criteria. It's the best thing that we have. I do recommend people do get them because it's one piece of the overall puzzle, but definitely not the most important piece. Unfortunately, that number on the test is primarily what doctors are treating and not the person sitting in front of them. The North American Menopause Society, one of their recommendations for osteoporosis in their guidelines, concluded that fracture risk depends on factors largely other than a bone density. In fact, there are risk factors for fractures and osteoporosis that are even more predictive than a bone density test, but that is oftentimes not even part of a conversation with a patient's doctor.
Okay, so I definitely am hanging on your every word. Like, I want to know what those are, right? So we're going to talk about those, and also, even what tools and preventative measures we can use to support our overall bone health and, prevent that deterioration of the quality of the bone of bone, as they said. So really quick, though, let's take a break for a message from our partner for this episode. Big thanks to Lumiere de Vie Skincare. Lumiere de Vie Skincare was founded by Amber Ridinger McLaughlin in response to her own experience of mere marginal results from countless costly creams. She realized the revitalization of her youthful skin could only occur if she developed products herself. Working closely with beauty scientists and exploring the most advanced ingredients derived from the earth and sea, Amber created Lumiere de Vie, the next generation of skincare. The extensive line of luxury skincare products is designed to address all skin types and concerns, with the highest quality natural ingredients and powerful formulas that help heal, soothe, moisturize, and protect. Lumiere de Vie acts as first aid for your skin. The result, rejuvenated, luminous, beautiful-looking skin. So in honor of having Dr. John as our guest today, and the fact that you're probably in, a holiday shopping mindset, let's highlight a couple of the Lumiere de Vie Ohms products that make incredible gifts. So first, the Skincare Value Kit gives you a cleanser, the toner pads, and hydrating aloe cream for just $75.50. The toner pads themselves are amazing. They're $38 by themselves. A great gift, even for women. I will admit, when I just don't feel like washing my face, the toner pads do the trick. You could also do the Tiger's Eye roller or the ice roller. Each one is just $17.50. So great stocking stuffers or a white elephant kind of gift if you need one. And because you're a Salad with a Side of Fries listener, you get 10% off and free shipping. So this is awesome. If you want to take advantage of this, text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846 to try Lumiere de Vie Skincare at 10% off and free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, back to bone health, osteoporosis. Maybe we do a little bit of like an approachable biology lesson to understand a bit of like the structure and function of bones so that we can then understand what, the minerals and collagen and stuff is going to do to support that. Does that make sense?
I think that's a great approach. It'll give people a better understanding and hopefully a better appreciation of these miraculous bones that we so effortlessly create and grow within our bodies. So people know bones because they're, hard and they allow us to move and run and lift things and drive our car and hug our loved ones and lift our kids up and play and all that great stuff. But it's more than just structural. Bones are also functional. They produce our blood, our red blood cells, our white blood cells for our immune system, and our platelets for healthy blood clotting. Our bone also it's been discovered not that long ago that it's part of our endocrine or hormonal system. There are some hormones involved, like osteocalcin, that has been shown to help with blood sugar and glucose and insulin. So it does more than just help us walk and lay down and stand up and move around. And it's the mineral parts of the bone, the minerals in the bone that give bone its hardness. But it's the collagen in the bone that gives bone its flexibility and its ultimate strength, and what in the research is referred to as bone quality. In fact, if you took a chicken bone, and I've done this before, and you soak it in vinegar, every day or so, change the vinegar out, refresh it, let that go for 5-6 days. And what happens is it leaches all of the minerals out of the bone. And what you're left with is just that connective tissue or the collagen in the bone. You can bend it. You can hit it against a table. You can drive over it with your car. You can twist it. It won't break. It's like a rubber chicken bone. But if you were to dissolve the collagen inside of a bone and all you were left with were the minerals, it's brittle like a column of chalk and it crumbles easily. And that's, I think, the most basic level of bone biology that's important to understand. And it sheds light onto, why is it that a bone density test is so limited in its value?
I love that. And so essentially what I'm hearing is that the bone density scan is really only able to look at that mineral content of the bones. So what are our better metrics or better tools for looking at to have a better perspective on the health of our bones before we even get into, all the things we can do?
Unfortunately, the state of the research right now is not great. There aren't wonderful tests out there. There are no tests. There's only 2 blood tests or urine tests that are endorsed by the International Osteoporosis Foundation and the International Federation for Laboratory Clinical Chemistry. It's a long name. And that's what's called the CTX test. One of them is CTX. And that is a breakdown product of collagen, where if it's high in the urine or the blood, then it's showing that you're losing collagen. And the minerals, by the way, attach to the collagen like a Christmas tree, right? So it's sort of that binding that keeps everything together. So that may be something to test, but there aren't really great clinical guidelines on how to do that. And there are a lot of things that can interfere with the different tests. There's very limited utility in those tests. And the understanding is that they're only good for testing whether somebody is compliant or following the treatment plan. Now, a bone density test is only retested every 18 to 24 months. So these blood or urine tests can be done more frequently. So that could give somebody an idea if, they're on the right path. But again, you're looking at one small little variable in a complex system and situation. The most predictive element or predictive value of whether or not somebody's going to fracture has nothing to do with a test. The most predictive and consistent predictor of a future fracture is somebody's gait and mobility. Can they walk unassisted? Can they stand up from a seated position easily? How fast can they walk 6 or 9 or 12 feet? That is more predictive because 95% of fractures occur because somebody falls. So anything we can do to prevent somebody falling can prevent somebody's fractures. And then what we want to do is create the environment in the body that will actually help to maintain and grow strong bones, to maintain strong bones, promote healthy bone density, but also just to promote health within the bones entirely. Another thing that I think is much more predictive than test is the medications somebody's taking. There is a long list of medications that destroy bone and increase fracture risk that most doctors aren't aware of. There are some that are commonly known, like prednisone, the glucocorticoids, but many that they don't know of. That even a study showed people who fractured a hip and they went in to the hospital, they took them off some of the medications that were commonly known to increase the risk for falls or fractures. But they put them on other medications that did the same thing, different types, but they did the same thing. So there was no net benefit overall. One of the most common things and the biggest concern for me, and there are two of them actually, medications are antidepressants, which especially after COVID, so many people are taking. So anything that artificially elevates serotonin destroys bone. There's serotonin receptors in the bone. And in fact, our gut produces 90 or 95% of the serotonin. It's not actually produced in our brain, but there are receptors in our bone, on the bone cells for serotonin. And what it does is it disrupts the natural balance of the bone building cells, the osteoblasts, and the cells that break down old, worn out bone and recycle it, called osteoclasts. So what it does, it allows osteoclasts to be more active. And so they're breaking down more bone and you're not building up new bone as fast. And research has shown that for people taking them for 1 to 5 years, every 19 people taking them will expect one person to break a bone. And even for less than 1 year, there's already an increase of fracture risk. I think it's for every approximately 50 people taking them, we'd expect one person to break a bone.
Yeah, this is, first of all, you're like inside my mind because you're tackling all the things that I wanted to cover, which I appreciate. But I think it's so important for everybody to hear that even things that we're doing that we think are helping us in some way, right? There's sort of two sides to that coin. And so recognizing that our bone health is often overlooked in the side effects of some of these medications. Or like I was on a birth control that they said, okay, once you're on it for however long, I don't remember what it was, then you need to go for a bone density scan. And so we end up in this cycle of, insufficient testing tools and, adding insult to injury in our lifestyle. And then with the medications, that it's sort of a perfect storm for, as you said, this being so prevalent, osteoporosis, so prevalent and such a silent disease. So, it's mind-boggling, which I guess brings up the question then. So you mentioned, right, gait and stability as great predictors. So then it stands to reason things that we can do to improve our longevity and improve our health in that regard would be building that stability, right? Balance, weight-bearing exercise, right? What are some of the other recommendations and some of the things that you recommended in your clinic for patients to sort of take a proactive approach to the bone health?
All right. And these are all in my book, chapter by chapter, the medication-induced osteoporosis, about what people can do. I talk about the data around the testing. But from a holistic point of view, there's a lot of things we can do and a lot of things that the research shows are beneficial. You already mentioned exercise. Diet is fundamentally important. It's crucial. Diet provides the nutrients that are the raw materials for our biochemistry to function, not only to build bone, but to create healthy levels of hormones and muscle and, happy chemicals in our brain and, all of the things that our body needs to do its job. And the research shows that the Mediterranean dietary pattern is associated with a 20% reduction in osteoporosis risk. But more importantly, and I educate people in my book about this, the most important question to ask about anything that's being recommended is, has it been shown to reduce fractures in clinical trials or in epidemiological research? And with this dietary pattern, the answer is yes. It's associated with a 21% reduction in hip fracture risk, the most dangerous type of fracture. So that's primarily a plant-forward diet. It's not a vegetarian and vegan diet or vegan diet. Those are actually associated with an increased risk for osteoporosis and fractures. But even when somebody is following a healthy dietary pattern like the Mediterranean diet, when I do my intake and I'm talking to them about their diet, it becomes clear very quickly that so many people who think they're eating healthy either aren't, they're not eating enough plants and getting enough healthy fiber, but they're not getting enough protein. So I mentioned all those hundreds of proteins that are in our bones. And in fact, the amount of protein somebody consumes accounts for up to 2 to 4% of bone mineral density. So ensuring you're getting an adequate amount of protein in the US recommended daily allowance as we get older isn't enough just to get that minimum to maintain healthy bones and healthy muscle mass for balance and strength. So again, in the book, I walk people through to calculate exactly how much protein they should be getting so they can start moving in that direction. So we talked about, evaluating your exercise, talked about diet. We talked about medications and really getting your whole list of medications and taking them to not just your doctor, but the pharmacist. It's such an underutilized resource in our healthcare system. A pharmacist has quick access to the most up-to-date databases where they can easily put it in and look for that. You can also just do a quick Google search and pull up data that way, but it's much easier, I think, better to talk to a healthcare professional. Then in terms of what to do, well, of course, as we mentioned, diet and exercise. But one thing that's often overlooked and definitely not discussed in most medical appointments is getting enough sleep. So when we don't get enough sleep, it's a stress on the body, and that's associated with an increased risk for osteoporosis. So getting about, 7 to 8 hours sleep a night is really important. And there are ways to help yourself naturally improve your sleep and promote healthy sleep. Unfortunately, the conventional approach to sleep medicine is to prescribe what's called a benzodiazepine or a benzodiazepine-like medication that basically knocks people out. Unfortunately, those also increase the risk for falls and fractures. So 95% of elderly patients, that's 65 years or older, are prescribed medicines that increase their risk for falls. So again, be very cautious of what you're being prescribed and ask, not just is it damaging bones, but is there an increase in fall risk? And then community. You mentioned community. And there's a chapter in my book on community as well, because the research is clear that when you have a healthy connections with other humans, you're healthier as well. And it reduces all-cause mortality, which is death from anything, including osteoporosis. And it's been shown that if people do fracture, they heal faster. And it doesn't have to be, the life of the party where you've got, a dozen friends. People have actually quantified this in terms of social networks. How many do you need? And they found you need 3, 5, 8 friends to get the maximum benefit. There's only 3. But the trick is you got to do things with them. You've got to reach out to them. You've got to be connected. So I do want to just drive home one point when it comes to exercise, because unfortunately, I think people get it in their head that it's difficult, or there's just this hesitancy or this idea that, just awful. I don't want to exercise. Anything can be exercise.
Yep.
Even walking is exercise. You don't have to go into a gym and pump iron. In fact, I don't personally. There are classes you can take there, but just in your daily natural life. I remember hearing this refrain of you've got to walk 10,000 steps a day. You've probably heard that. And for years I was asking, because this is how my mind works, when I'd hear that, well, do you have a study? Show me the data. Well, it turns out that 10,000 steps a day recommendation was invented out of whole cloth by a Japanese watch company to sell more watches. There was absolutely zero data supporting that, but people decided to look at it. There are multiple studies now that show that all you have to do is walk an average of 7,000 to 7,500 steps a day. The benefits seem to plateau at 7,500 steps per day. And that's associated with a 50 to 70% reduction in all-cause mortality. So it's cumulative. It could just mean if you go to the store, parking even 1 row or 2 rows further away, you don't even have to go all the way across the parking lot. taking the stairs instead of the elevator, going for a walk with a friend. There's lots of things you can do. If you like gardening, garden. Just get moving.
Yeah, I love it. First of all, I mean, I couldn't agree more on all of the things. And I hope what everybody's hearing is that everything we talk about all the time, every week, on every episode, is all the same things that we're talking about here, right? It all reinforces that health across the board comes down to a handful of common things. And that, even with a lot of the diagnoses and things that are out there, we have a lot in our control. And we can actually really take this proactive approach. And, everything you're hearing now, supporting your bones, is really important and exactly what we talk about doing for everything else. So thank you for all of that. I guess last question before we do our rapid fire. I know I work with supplements in my practice. You own a supplement company and work with supplements with your patients. When it comes to supplements for bone health, a lot of times people say, oh, it's all I need is calcium. And we know that that's not necessarily, that's not the case. Vitamin D, K2, all of these factors. Will you talk through a little bit of what somebody needs to consider or think about when supplementing for bone health?
So the most important question to ask when you're evaluating any product or formula is, are the nutrients supported by clinical trials that show that they maintain strong bones as indicated by fewer fractures in the clinical trials? Not just if they improve bone density, which again, it's a number on a test, which is not that great at predicting bone strength or estimating bone strength, but are there clinical trials showing that it actually reduced fractures in the clinical trial volunteers? There are a lot of products on the market with a lot of different nutrients in it, but there are only 4 that are actually supported by that criteria, that meet both of those criteria. So it's calcium and vitamin D, been shown to reduce fractures by about 18 to 23%, which is pretty good. Nothing to shirk at, but we can do better. And I'm a big fan of testing vitamin D. Not only are there immune benefits to vitamin D at levels higher than 50 nanograms per milliliter, but the research shows that when you're at around 30 to 44, that's when you get the maximum benefit when it comes to being associated with fewer hip fractures and lower hip fracture risk. So even at lower, at 20, this research of vitamin D level of 20, you can see benefits with bone density. So it gets back to this bone density story, but you don't see the fracture reduction until you get to 30 to 44. So you want to look at the fracture outcomes as the endpoint in the study. So vitamin D and calcium, for sure. The other is a specific form of vitamin K2. You mentioned vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is a category of nutrients. There are different types of vitamin K2. What people find in dietary supplements are MK7 or MK4. Of those 2, only MK4 meets the criteria that I've set, that I think is the highest and best standard for evaluating supplements. And that is MK7, first of all, in clinical trials in different doses, has only been shown to slow down how fast somebody loses bone density. It's not been shown to improve or increase bone density in postmenopausal osteoporosis or any other type of osteoporosis. And there are no studies showing at all that it reduces fractures, that it maintains strong bones. None. MK4, in contrast, in the amount of 45 milligrams per day, has been approved by the Ministry of Health in Japan for bone health since 1995. There are over 25 clinical trials on that nutrient in that dose, showing that it promotes healthy bone density, but also, and more importantly, that it maintains strong bones as indicated by over 70% fewer fractures in clinical trial volunteers with postmenopausal osteoporosis. The only other nutrients that were given with the MK4 when they did give other nutrients was calcium and vitamin D. So all these other nutrients that people throw in, like magnesium, for example, that's never been shown to reduce fractures. And it's a good nutrient, but for bone health, or boron, never been shown to reduce fractures. To get that over 70% reduction in the clinical trials, it was MK4, 45 milligrams per day, calcium, and vitamin D. And in fact, in 2006, in my clinical practice, I'm looking at this research, I'm working with my patients. I couldn't find the clinical dose of MK4, 45 milligrams per day with calcium and vitamin D, didn't exist in this country. I needed it for my patients. That was the entire reason why I started my dietary supplement company, to provide these solutions to powerfully promote bone health. And that was one of the earliest products that I formulated, manufactured, and released. And that's distributed all over the country to doctors through distributors. We've shipped into 15 different countries, my line of products. And I'm so convinced by the research on those nutrients that my company now guarantees that within 6 months, it'll either stabilize or improve somebody's bone density, but we guarantee that it will maintain strong bones. Meaning if somebody actually breaks a bone while they're taking the product as directed, we'll refund their money for all qualifying purchases between their bone density test results. That's the power of that nutrient. That's how well it's been studied and how convinced I am by the research. The fourth nutrient, if we've got time, is strontium. That's been shown to reduce fractures. But the form of strontium in the United States, strontium citrate, there are no clinical trials showing that it is effective or safe. It may be, but all of the clinical trials were done in Europe in a medication called strontium ranelate. Of the 6 large clinical trials with strontium ranelate, 5 of them showed vertebral fracture risk and no hip fracture risk reduction. So only one of the 6 studies showed that it reduced hip fractures as well. So probably it does not do a great job or does not reduce hip fractures, strontium ranelate. But importantly, if you take strontium, it gives you a false bone density test result. Regardless of the limitations of the bone density test, I do want them to be done and tracked. It's one piece of a larger puzzle, and I want them to be as accurate as possible. With respect to strontium ranelate as well, after it was on the market, it was discovered that it's dangerous, that for every one fracture that it prevented, that it created a blood clot that could cause a stroke and a heart attack or a blood clot in the lungs. And so it was removed from the market for many of these countries in Europe because of that. In the US, only a dietary supplement, strontium ranelate or strontium citrate, is available. There are no safety studies on that. It may be safe, it may not. It may be effective, it may not. We just don't know. And more than that, I do just want to add in there that these are all nutrients. These are dietary supplements. So they're not medications. They're not evaluated by the FDA and approved to diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. So we've got to look at the whole body of the clinical trials and be really honest of what they show in terms of promoting and supporting health of an organ or of a physiological process. They're not treating diseases. They are powerfully, when supported by the research, promoting and pushing health in the direction that we want it to go in.
Well said, 100%. And I think this also reinforces for everybody the importance of, working with someone who is knowledgeable and has that experience around the supplements and the ingredients and that research, because I think it's a large onus to put on someone to be able to read packages and know exactly what, they're looking at. So thank you for all of that.
Well, and I love that you said that, because it is a specialty. So there are doctors out there who are recommending nutrients who frankly don't have a very deep understanding of it. It's similar to pharmacology in the sense of there are what are called, pharmacokinetic studies and bioavailability studies on nutrients or clinical trials on nutrients. And it's a matter of really having a deep basic science understanding, but also clinical applications understanding that is gonna serve patients as best as we can to give them the results that we all want, so people know they're getting their money's worth.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think it's time for our short list of rapid fire off-topic questions that I ask every expert.
Let's do it.
Okay. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week?
So I got up this morning because I knew it wouldn't fit into my day. And I took a 6 a.m. P-Volve class. It's a new exercise company. I love P-Volve. It's natural movements. It is a great, natural sort of mobility for the joints. It's an amazing, amazing system.
Awesome. We'll have to talk. Do you know Antonietta?
I don't. Who's Antonietta?
Okay. Well, so I'm trying to think of what's her role. She's head of education and programming, I think, for P-Evolve here in New York.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, and then the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health.
So my kids love Cheez-Its. So we've got a bag of Cheez-Its here at the house. I sat on the couch the other night and just sat and watched some TV and vegged out. And I think I probably ate a half a bag of Cheez-Its. But I loved every minute of it. So I'm also a believer of, not do like food and life should be fun. So I teach my patients. Yeah, I teach my patients, like, if you're great 6 days out of the week, just eat whatever you want on the seventh day. Do whatever you want. People inevitably are going to find that they're feeling a lot better in those 6 days where they're eating healthy and they're moving in that direction. And on the seventh day, when they just, eat whatever crap they want, a pint of Ben and Jerry's, whatever it is, fried foods, that their energy level goes down or their mood goes down. They just don't feel as good. And that's a great experience and motivator, I think, to get people to eat healthier longer term. And this is all about developing healthy habits. But I'm also a believer of, look, there's some great crap out there, junk food, that it's fun every once in a while to indulge in.
For sure. All right. If you weren't a naturopathic doctor, what would you do?
You know what I would probably be doing? Because I was at that point in my life, I was at a fork in the road. If I didn't get into naturopathic medical school, I was going to go to rabbinical school and become a rabbi. So that's probably what I would be doing. I'd be studying Torah.
Yeah. All right. Your favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise, or you could give us a fiction book.
Wow, that's a tough one. Other than my area of expertise, there's so many of them. So can I give you in two categories? Would that be all right?
Sure.
So a couple of books that come to my mind in terms of outside of my area of expertise are The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor, which is a great book. How Champions Think. It's about positive psychology and that mindset piece. And then on a whole nother realm, totally outside of that, probably my favorite fiction book was William Faulkner's Absalom.
I love it. Okay, so many to add to my list. All right, if you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
The sickness and ailment of low expectations.
Ooh, that is a good one. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Oh God, what would be my superpower? Would be anybody that I would interact with or see that they would be infected with the overwhelming desire, and we begin to treat other people how they would want to be treated.
Please. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve, arrogance.
Oh. All right, last one. In your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
Moving away from this obsession with technology is going to cure everything, and moving in a way, it's going back to what we've known with our physiology and biology, that it's lifestyle, attitude, diet, sleep, the basics, and people would start just living and thinking more simply along those lines. And doctors would be educated in that, because they're not right now.
Yes. Please. Well, thank you again for being here. Just truly appreciate your insights, your ability to explain it to us so that we all understand it. So thank you. Tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, get to NBI, all that stuff.
My website is the best place, nbihealth.com. That's nbihealth.com, where there's tons of free resources, articles on there, other interviews that I've done. There also are all of my products people can look at, and other great information. You can connect with me on social media there as well. nbihealth.com.
Perfect. And we'll put links in the episode notes for everybody too. So thank you again. Appreciate your time and energy.
My pleasure. Thank you. This was fun.
Good. Awesome. All right. And then this Friday for our Nutrition Nugget, we're talking about sauna suits. So maybe you've seen people wearing them in your gym. They remind me of like a 90s style tracksuit. Maybe that's because that's when they were pretty popular. And then they're made of a material. They're like a tracksuit made of a material that's designed to trap your body heat, increase your body temperature, increase how much you sweat. So are they health supporting? Are they a gimmick to sell you something? Or could they even be health detracting? So we'll get into all of it on Friday and this week's Nutrition Nugget. So be sure wherever you're listening now, click the plus sign or the follow button, and then your app will alert you when the Nutrition Nugget goes live. Make it easier for you. It's always there on Friday mornings when you wake up, though. So until next week, remember, perhaps it's time to pay a little more attention to your bones because your bone density scan may not be all the information you need to maintain your most capable skeleton. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform, share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it and you are worth it. Happy healthy.